Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ahli bayti tayyibin at-tahirin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this panel entitled Islamic Law and the Future. My name is Reza Nekumanesh, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno and the Vice President of the Shia Muslim Council of Southern California. I'm honored to be taking part in this Imam Ali conference again this year. I would like to thank all of those who made this happen, and specifically Sayyid Jawad Qazwini for all of his hard work. It is truly a service to the world that these amazing panels and presentations come to you as our community celebrates the life and the legacy of the one honored to be birthed in the Holy Kaaba, the first one to stand in defense of Rasulullah, and the first one to lie down in defense of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, our Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. In our panel, we will be diving into a discussion around the role of Islamic jurisprudence, fuqaha, in taking what we know and applying it to current trends, phenomena, and science. Earlier years of Shia formation, as early as Sheikh Tusi, we saw our ulama had a negative view of ijtihad, mostly as it was related to analogy or opinion. But as scholarship continued and ijtihad found new light in later scholars such as Muhaqqiq al-Hilli and others, we found not only the validity, but the necessity for our Islamic scholars to derive rulings for the believers to respond to our modern understandings. In today's world, more than ever before, the rapid advancements in science and technology necessitate a scholarly relationship between religious jurisprudence and experts in scientific advancements. And that is what we have the pleasure of in this panel today. I am pleased to open this conversation by introducing two esteemed scholars. First of all, I would like to welcome Sayyida Hawra Milani. Sister Hawra is a PhD candidate in cybersecurity and works in the social impact team at Meta, formerly Facebook. She speaks on issues related to women in tech and is passionate about ensuring Muslim women are represented in the global tech community. A mother of two, Sister Hawra currently resides in London, UK. And next, I am pleased to welcome Sayyid Mahdi Qazwini, a native of Southern California. He has studied the traditional sciences at the Islamic Seminary in Qom and graduate Islamic studies at the Claremont Colleges in Claremont, California, where he and I are co-alumni. He currently serves as an educator for a number of nonprofit and business organizations here in the United States. And to you both, I say, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sayyid Mahdi, in your opening remarks, can you begin by offering us a minor glimpse into the world of Shia interpretation of law, of ijtihad?
Absolutely. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you for a great question. Ijtihad, really in its essence or its contextual meaning, refers to the ability to extract and deduce Islamic laws from their sources. This can be either by way of deduction, induction, or in some schools of Islamic law, analogy, what we refer to as qiyas. And the term itself comes from the idea of exertion, jihad. Specifically in this context, though, intellectual exertion, meaning that to understand and interpret the law, you have to exhaust all of your intellectual resources in order to arrive at a conclusion and a proper understanding around a particular issue. So there's a few components to how this could, how this plays out and, how ijtihad becomes effective. Number one, the mujtahid, the person who undergoes the process of ijtihad or intellectual exertion, obviously, number one, has to have a comprehensive understanding of the Quran, a comprehensive understanding of the Hadith. Those are the two main sources of Islamic law that we use, of language, etymology, linguistics, hermeneutics. But also, another component is for them to have sound judgment and good moral character. Because it's one thing to have the knowledge, but it's something completely, entirely different to do the right thing with that knowledge. And I think this is an area where Islamic law and the ethical applications of technology and medicine intersect. So why is it relevant for the future of Islamic law? Because as new technologies and realities rapidly emerge and change, it becomes increasingly important for jurists and experts to provide sound legal judgments to help navigate unfamiliar territory. A number of examples in the past have been, Muslim scholars who commented on, the permissibility of insurance, organ donation, cosmetic surgery, genetic engineering. And it's similar to how a judge in today's world would understand common law by studying old law, but also understanding contextual law, contextual, common, modern law, that is. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into ijtihad and why it's important for the future of Islamic law.
Thank you, Sayyid Mahdi, for that perfect introduction into our session. Sayyida Hawra, you have a particular expertise in the field of tech and artificial intelligence, something super exciting. Can you begin today with some hopes that you have particularly around ijtihad regarding technology and its ethical consequences?
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you, Hajj Reza. Brilliant question. Thank you, Sayyid Mahdi, for starting it with such brilliant insights. We're at the stage right now where artificial intelligence is being integrated into every aspect of our lives, and that's something we know. So whether it's subtle things like digital voice assistants, Face ID, recommended and customized search results when it comes to Amazon, Google, any search engine you're using, to the bigger ones like self-driving cars and robotic medical surgeries. Now, this leaves us not only wondering what the moral and ethical obligations are for us as humans, but even more so as Muslims. So examples of this are when it comes to life support machines, right? Or a robot has to decide whether to pull the plug. Or a self-driving car that's about to collide and has to decide whether to save the driver and kill the pedestrians who are innocent, or whose responsibility is that? And so there are many more issues that fall within the topics of automation, liability, and responsible AI. And from what the Honorable Sayyid Mahdi has just shared, there are specific ways in which the Islamic laws are derived. But we sometimes feel like my personal view is that we're playing a catch-up game when it comes to laws and rulings that tend to come after the technology has become widespread. We have these questions such as, is buying cryptocurrency halal? Can I pay khums with cryptocurrency? Can I pay sadaqah with cryptocurrency? And many things related. We hear the phrases Web3, NFTs, decentralization, blockchain, and there's so much already going on in the tech world. And so my hopes really are to do with, can we mitigate these issues or at least explore them by bringing together the disciplines and bridging the gap that highly qualified and experienced professionals in tech are working very closely together with our ulama and our mujtahideen to ensure that there's an Islamic perspective and ruling right from the start, as opposed to waiting for these technologies to become widespread and then trying to find a ruling for that. So those are my hopes and wishes.
I hope they're the hopes and wishes of our entire community, inshallah. Thank you, Sister Hawra. Sayyid Mahdi, with respect to those hopes that were laid out by a scholar in technology, can you share for us a time when our ulama engaged scientists or other experts in their fields to address new inventions or realities?
Absolutely. I mean, this is really the beauty of ijtihad, that these conversations actually happen often, and I'll talk later a little bit more about what we can do with those conversations. But there's a number of examples. One example I actually heard from a gentleman who had experienced this. He said that in the late 80s, or I believe late 80s or early 90s, a group of mu'mineen in the United States had traveled overseas and had met one of the top jurists, and the issue that came up was the issue of the direction of the Qibla. Now, we all know, most of us here in the United States, the vast majority, we pray towards the northeast. Now, the angle is a little bit different depending on what city you're in. But basically, a group of believers had sat with this cleric, and they had laid out a map, and they had drawn a line between one of the cities, I believe it was New York, all the way to Mecca. And on a flat map, obviously, it's not northeast, it's southeast. And so the scholar, based on this conversation, had issued a ruling that you need to pray, if you're in the United States, towards the southeast. Well, what ended up happening is that a group of experts later traveled again and explained the concept of spherical geometry. How because our Earth obviously is not flat, I mean, most of us believe that it's not flat, that because it is shaped the way that it is, the shortest distance between the two lines is not a direct line on a flat map, but rather it goes northeast and then comes back down southeast. That's what it looks like on a map. If you've traveled from, for instance, Los Angeles to Dubai or Los Angeles to Istanbul, if you've observed the flight map, you notice that you fly above, you go northeast over the North Pole and then back down. And that's because of spherical geometry. That's really the shortest distance between the two. Now, here's what's really impressive is that the scholar retracted his earlier statement based on his conversation with geographical experts. And that really requires a lot of humility to be able to retract your own statement based on what the experts are telling you is true. So these conversations need to happen because with the introduction of science and tech and AI and these rapid developments, I'm sure we're going to have a number of situations where people want to figure out what to do and they want the response from the scholars. However, they want to feel confident that those scholars are basing their judgments off of sound opinions. So that's, I mean, that's one example, and there's a number of other examples that we can draw from.
That's an awesome example, and we appreciate it. To note that 700 or 800 years before Galileo, it was Muslim scientists who understood that the world was a sphere and traveled the world to tell other leaders this reality. And being that we're on a panel about Islamic law in the future with a scientist, I don't think any of us are flat earthers, but I could be wrong. Sister Hawra, how can you share with us some of the challenges you face as a scientist who is a believer and a practitioner and wishes to bring those two fields of science, religion, and technology into a closer discussion and cooperation?
Thank you so much, Hajrada. That's a brilliant example, Sayyid Mahdi. Thank you for sharing that story. It's very, very interesting, and one that, you know, exemplifies the need to have that bridge that gap between those who are, you know, technologically advanced and the ulama and mujtahideen, so that they have a strong input and work together. So regarding your question, Hajrada, there are two main issues or challenges that I find here. One, that as a community, as a Muslim community, I feel like this tech space has still not heard our voice. So working here, I've been in the tech community for all my life. I feel like the space that still doesn't have enough representation of diverse voices. And we need more people to specialize in this field, since it's related to nearly every other issue and aspect in our lives. So, for example, who trains this AI? You know, who is feeding? The AI isn't going to teach itself, right? Later on it does. But in the first instance, who controls these machine learning, you know, who puts the data sets out? Who trains it? Who creates these machine learning models? You know, who's feeding it the original information? We have, you know, stories where, for example, Google, you know, and you can read these online. Google trained an AI model, and it identified a Black person as a gorilla, and that was a big shock, and it was a big issue that they had to deal with. Or, for example, I think it's Microsoft who created an AI model to help them with recruitment, and they realized that it was being biased and you know, disregarding females, and so that obviously that wasn't helpful because they trained it to have a better representation through their recruitment services. And so we look at these, you know, at which point will the Muslim representation show up? At which point will our voices be heard? And so one of my biggest issues and challenges is actually telling people, listen, there are opportunities, many, you know, a vast amount of opportunities for people to come into the tech world. So why not check it out? Why not try it? And the second one, as you know, as a visibly Muslim educator / researcher, I feel like it is my responsibility to not only share scientifically based and fact-based evidence to youth or to those who I'm sharing this knowledge with, but also Islamically fact-based. And so having these conversations and strengthening the relationship between the religious scholars and the tech specialists, or even, I don't know, creating a consortium or creating some kind of relationship or conference such as this one, where we have these conversations quite often and we're syncing and collaborating all the time, I think it would be a brilliant way to go forward and really mitigate these challenges and issues.
Thank you, Sayyidah Hawra. Thank you both tremendously for offering us this little glimpse into a vast world of possibility for our ummah. We as believers, and practitioners, we sit on the sidelines praying exactly what Sayyidah Hawra just mentioned, that the gap between the two sciences, the religious and physical, is closed, and our ulama work together to engage those who are most knowledgeable in their respective fields. I think it would change our world. This discussion between Sayyidah Hawra and Sayyid Mahdi was an awesome window into those hopes. And also maybe our faith depends on it. As we know, if religion or religious dictates are irrelevant and those deriving them are aloof from our reality, it's inevitable that our books will become nothing but collectors of dust that benefit no one. And that's a sad thought and reality that we have to avert. On a very small scale, and we can apply this understanding to our world and science as we celebrate the legacy of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. We can remember that he prophetically directed his followers by saying that you must not raise your children in the same manner with which your fathers raised you, for they have been born into a different era than yours. The world advances and we must strive to understand not only the world, but what our faith teaches us regarding those advancements. As we have a few minutes left, I would like to ask each of you, first Sister and Sayyidah Hawra, with some closing remarks, followed by Sayyid Mahdi.
Thank you, Hajj Reza. I have a very small message to all the people who currently feel like we have to choose tech and science over religion or disregard Islamic rulings because they don't fit the narrative that we're hoping for. I would say make your ideas heard and seen. Share your perspective. Don't expect it to be someone else's problem when you are able to provide very valuable insights and ideas. You know, we have 12 and 13-year-olds who can tell you all about the latest tech, things that I don't have any knowledge or idea about because of how immersed they are and how interested they are and how much how much time they have to spend reading and learning, and the amount of information and data they consume online. So I would say, you know, a message to all our community members, especially the youth: make your voices heard and share those insights because they are valuable. Don't keep them to yourself and then say nobody, you know, people are disregarding my thoughts and ideas. That's my message and my hope, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you. Sayyid Mahdi.
I want to thank Dr. Hawra for really bringing this up because you know I echo her remarks and you know the invitation and I'd reinforce that the invitation to have Muslims come and work into tech. In fact, she's offered me a job at Facebook before. I gotta say that on the record, which I was very thankful for. But just as a final response, I would say that, you know, as we move into the future, hopefully there is more conversation between what one scholar referred to as, he said we have ulama al-nusus who are text scholars, the ones who spend their life studying the Quran and the Hadith and, you know, the textual sciences. And then there are another set of scholars, context scholars, ulama al-waqa. These are the scholars of the experts in the fields of medicine and technology and AI and all of that good stuff. And there's no such thing as over communicating. You know, we learned that in the business world today. You look at the top leaders in the business world; they're constantly they're over communicating. They're constantly reinforcing their message. They're constantly saying the same thing because you can't say the right thing too many times. So there needs to be continuous collaboration. A lot of the frustration that I get from young people sometimes is that the ulama, they're just not listening. Maybe there's a lot of red tape. Maybe there are a lot of barriers in communication. And the thing that I feel our community wants the most, I don't feel that they need an immediate answer for everything. As long as we maintain conversation and we as the scholarly class of people, we maintain communication and we stay curious. I think when we stay curious, we give people hope in the stability of our intellectual future. So it's not really about what you know. There's a saying that says, you know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if we remain curious and open to conversation and open to collaboration, that will show people that our scholars really care about our intellectual future and about our, you know, our deen. And so my hope is that we continue to have these conversations and stay curious, because there's a lot to learn with the world that's coming ahead.
Inshallah. So thank you, Sayyid Mahdi. One more revelation before we go. Sister Hawra offered you a job at Facebook. Is there some sort of relationship that we should know about?
Yeah, she's my maternal aunt, and I love her to death.
This is on the record. Like, he's my favorite nephew, so there you go.
And the rest of the nephews had to hear that. Sayyida Hawra, Sayyid Mahdi, thank you so much for all of your brilliance that you shared with us today. We want to thank Sayyid Jawad Qazwini again for putting together this conference, Ummah, Ahlul Bayt TV, and all the sponsors. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of this beautiful conference. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.